Story 1. I just turned 22 when everything went south with my parents in Seattle. We had a huge fight, and I knew I couldn't stay at home anymore. I was desperate to find a place, but my bank account was practically screaming for mercy. I'd been crashing on friends' couches for weeks, and let's just say their hospitality was wearing thin. So, I turned to every roommate app and website I could find, scrolling endlessly for something affordable. That's when I stumbled across Michael's listing. He was renting a room in his 3-bedroom, 1-story house in a quiet Seattle suburb for $1,200 a month. It was a steal for the area, and the ad made it sound perfect. Michael described himself as a private guy who'd barely be around, meaning I'd have the place mostly to myself. There were a few rules in all caps. No parties, no big gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and absolutely no going into the basement or attic. They seemed fair enough, like standard landlord stuff. I messaged him, and we set up a time to meet. When I pulled up to the house, it looked unassuming. Single story, a bit dated, with a tidy lawn. Michael opened the door, and right away, I got a vibe. He was tall, lanky, with a quiet voice that shook a little, like he wasn't used to talking to people. His eyes darted around, avoiding mine, and his handshake was clammy. Still, I brushed it off. The house was great for the price. An open layout with the kitchen, living room, and dining area all flowing together. My bedroom was spacious, already furnished with a bed and a dresser. Michael repeated the rules in person, especially the one about staying out of the basement and attic, which he said he used for storage. I nodded, told him I was in, and we shook hands again. 2 days later, I was moving in. No lease, no contract, just a month-to-month deal, cash up front. It felt a little sketchy, but I was desperate. Settling in was easy. The room had a lock, and Michael gave me the key, which I thought was a nice touch. I hung up some posters, stuffed my clothes in the dresser, and tried to make it feel like home. Michael didn't say much about himself, just that he worked odd hours and wouldn't be around much. But that turned out to be a lie. His car was always in the driveway when I got home from work. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the weird stuff started. At night, I'd hear noises. Footsteps creaking outside my room, doors opening and closing. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me lie awake, staring at the ceiling. One night, I got up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m. and noticed the basement door was cracked open. A faint, flickering light spilled out from below, and there were these dull banging sounds, like someone was moving heavy boxes. My heart raced. What was he doing down there? I tiptoed closer, peering down the stairs, but the light was coming from a corner I couldn't see. Then the banging stopped. Michael stepped into view at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me. His face wasn't angry, but it was cold, almost empty. It sent a chill down my spine. I mumbled an apology, said I was just heading to the bathroom. "Shut the basement door," he snapped, his voice sharp. I did, heart pounding, and locked myself in my room for the rest of the night. Something wasn't right. I started locking my door every time I left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Things with Michael in Seattle were getting weirder by the day, and I was on edge. A week after the basement incident, I came home from work and found my bedroom door unlocked. I always locked it before leaving. Always. My stomach dropped as I checked my room. Nothing was missing, but my clothes in the dresser were messed up, like someone had rifled through them. The closet door was slightly ajar too. It hit me. Michael had a key. He'd been in my room, going through my stuff. The thought made my skin crawl. I wanted to confront him, but he wasn't answering when I knocked on his door, even though his car was in the driveway. I microwaved dinner, feeling his presence in the house like a shadow. Later, I heard his door creak open. I caught him in the living room, about to leave, and asked point blank if he'd been in my room. His face went blank, and he said, "Number." I stayed calm, told him my door was unlocked and my stuff looked touched. He claimed I had the only key, then said he was in a hurry and bolted. I stood there, stunned. My gut screamed to get out, but I didn't have anywhere to go. I started checking roommate apps again, desperate for a new place. Then, one night, I realized Michael wasn't home. His car was gone. Curiosity took over. I had to know what was in that basement. I checked the windows to make sure he was really gone, then opened the basement door. No light switch, so I used my phone's flashlight. The stairs creaked like something out of a horror movie. At the bottom, the basement was small, with a ratty carpet curling up at the edges and a single ugly couch in the middle. A funky smell hit me, like sewage, but worse. It got stronger near a locked door in the corner. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Part of me was relieved. I didn't really want to know what was behind it. I scanned the room, saw some taped up boxes, but didn't touch them. I ran back upstairs, heart racing, and locked my door. That night, I woke up to a sound, a floorboard creaking right by my bed. I froze, then turned and saw Michael leaning over me in the dark. I screamed. He shushed me, his voice low, and asked if I'd been in the basement. I yelled no, demanding to know how he got in when I'd locked the door. He didn't answer, just asked again if I was sure. I flipped it on him, shouting if he'd been in my room before. He denied it, then held up his empty hand like it meant something. "I think you should find other living arrangements," he said, then walked out. I was done. I started packing right then, banging on his door to demand half my rent back since I'd only been there 2 weeks. His arm slid out with $400 in hundreds. Creepy even in that moment. I grabbed it and was out within an hour. I slept in my car that night, too shaken to think straight. The next day, I went back to my parents' house in Seattle. After telling them everything, something shifted. They welcomed me back. A month later, I found my own place, and things with my parents got better. But that house, Michael, that feeling of being watched.it stuck with me. If you're looking for a random roommate online, trust your gut. One wrong vibe, and you're better off anywhere else. Story 2. My junior year of college in Austin, Texas, was when I decided to move off campus. The dorms were too cramped, and I wanted some freedom. The school hooked me up with a student apartment and paired me with a guy named Ethan, another student who needed a roommate. When I met him, he seemed nice enough. Big smile, polite, always ready with small talk. He was the kind of guy who'd ask about your day and actually listen. The apartment was decent. 2 bedrooms, a shared living space, and a small kitchen. I settled in, thinking this could work. But it didn't take long for things to feel off. Ethan had this habit of lingering in my room whenever he stopped by to chat. He'd lean against the doorframe, asking personal questions, like where I grew up, who I was dating, stuff that felt a little too nosy. Sometimes he'd pick up random things on my desk, like a pen or a notebook, and fiddle with them. I brushed it off as him being overly friendly, but it bugged me. Then the noises started. Late at night, I'd hear sounds coming from his room. Muffled, talking, shuffling, like he was moving furniture. I told myself it was just Ethan watching television or on a call, but it didn't sit right. The walls were thin, and the noises felt too deliberate, too close. One night, I couldn't sleep because the sounds were louder than usual, whispering, almost like he was talking to himself. I got up, crept down the hallway, and pressed my ear against his door. The whispering was low, frantic, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart was pounding. Then, clear as day, I heard him say my name. Sarah. I froze. Did he know I was there? I tiptoed back to my room, crawled into bed, and pulled the covers over my head like a kid. My mind was racing. Why was he saying my name? Was he sleep-talking, or was something weirder going on? The next day, I couldn't look at him the same. He acted normal, all smiles, but I kept replaying that whisper in my head. The noises didn't stop. Every night I'd lie awake, listening to the shuffling, the low murmurs. I started noticing other things too. Ethan would glance at me oddly, like he was studying me. Once, I caught him standing outside my door when I opened it, and he just laughed it off, saying he was about to knock. I started locking my door at night, but it didn't help the feeling that I was being watched. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering again, but this time it was closer, right outside my door. I held my breath, ear pressed against the wood, and there it was. Ethan's voice, low and muttering. Then he said my name again. "Sarah," I shouted. "Yeah, you good?" Trying to sound casual. Silence. Just footsteps retreating to his room. My hands were shaking as I double-checked the lock. I felt trapped in that apartment, like every move I made was being noticed. Ethan's friendliness started feeling like a mask, and I couldn't shake the sense that he was hiding something. I wanted to confront him, but what would I even say? Stop whispering my name at night. I felt stuck, alone in this place with someone I didn't trust anymore. The worst part? I had no proof. Just this creeping dread that something was very, very wrong. Living with Ethan in Austin was like walking on eggshells. The whispering, the weird glances, the feeling of being watched. It was eating at me. I couldn't keep ignoring it. One night, I woke up to the soft click of my bedroom door closing. My heart stopped. I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. Unmistakably, Ethan's. That was it. I had to know what was going on. The next day, I waited until Ethan left for class. My hands were shaking as I crept into his room. It felt wrong, but I needed answers. His room was messy, clothes everywhere, books stacked haphazardly. I checked his desk, his drawers, and nothing out of the ordinary. Then I noticed a small drawer at the back of his closet, tucked behind some boxes. I pulled it open, and my blood ran cold. Inside was a stack of photos, dozens of them. Most were of me, asleep in my bed. Some were so close I could see the texture of my skin, my hair fanned out on the pillow. Others showed another guy, probably his old roommate, also asleep. The angles were all different. Some from above, some from the side, like he'd been sneaking in night after night. I felt sick, my knees buckling. Ethan had been coming into my room, taking pictures while I slept, and I had no idea. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but I was terrified. What kind of person does this? I grabbed a few photos as proof, snapped a picture of the drawer with my phone, and got out of there. Back in my room, I locked the door and sat on my bed, staring at the photos. I felt violated, helpless, like the walls of the apartment were closing in. I couldn't stay, but I was scared to face Ethan alone. He could come back any minute, and I didn't know what he was capable of. I thought about calling my parents, but we weren't on great terms, and I didn't want to admit how scared I was. Instead, I packed a bag with essentials and headed to the student housing office the next morning. I showed them the photos, my voice shaking as I explained everything. The whispering, the footsteps, the pictures. The staff looked horrified. They promised to handle it and reassign me to a new apartment with a different roommate, a quiet girl who seemed normal. I moved out that day, avoiding Ethan completely. The housing office said they'd deal with him, but I never got details. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to forget. They told me to file a report with campus police, but I was too shaken to follow through. I kept the photos though, in case I ever needed them. Even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of those pictures. The way Ethan's voice sounded saying my name in the dark. I never found out who the other guy in the photos was, but I wonder if he went through the same thing, if he figured out what Ethan was doing. Moving to the new place helped, but for a long time, I'd wake up at night, checking my door, listening for footsteps. It's hard to feel safe after something like that. If you're living with someone new, pay attention to the little things, the glances, the noises, the vibes. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't wait for proof like I did. Get out before you're the one staring at photos of yourself, wondering how long you've been watched. Story 3. When I was 23, I got a job offer that meant moving to Denver, Colorado, far from my hometown. It was exciting, but finding a place to live on my budget was a nightmare. I didn't know anyone in the city, so I posted on every roommate site I could think of. Facebook, Craigslist, even a Denver subreddit. A guy named James reached out on Facebook, saying he had a room available in his house. His profile looked normal. A few photos of him hiking, smiling, nothing creepy. He offered a virtual tour over FaceTime, and the place seemed perfect. A modest house in a decent part of town, just a 10-minute drive from my new office. The rent was affordable, and his rules were simple. No parties, keep things clean. I was cautious, especially as a woman living with a guy I didn't know, but my parents' warnings felt overblown. James seemed chill, so I packed my stuff and drove to Denver a week later. He met me out front, shorter than I expected, but friendly, handing me a key with a big grin. The room was already furnished, left over from a friend who'd moved out. I swapped out the bedding, hung my clothes, and started settling in. James hovered a bit, asking about my job, my hobbies, trying to make me feel at home. It was nice, but maybe a little too eager. The next day, he offered to show me around Denver. Shopping spots, restaurants, the usual. I wasn't thrilled, but agreed to keep things friendly. We drove around, but then he suggested a sit-down lunch, just the two of us. It felt too much like a date, and I wasn't here for that. I said I wasn't hungry, hoping he'd drop it. Instead, he pushed for drinks, saying, "Come on, just one." I politely shut it down, saying I don't drink on work nights. He went quiet, his mood shifting like I'd offended him. I felt uneasy, but told myself it was no big deal. My first week at work kept me busy, so I didn't think much about James until I did laundry one evening. My hamper looked different. Clothes weren't how I'd left them. Then I noticed a pair of my underwear was gone. I tore my room apart, checking every corner, but it was nowhere. The thought hit me. Had James taken it? I pushed it away, not wanting to believe it, but the idea stuck. I decided to buy a lockable doorknob from a hardware store that weekend. While James was out, I swapped it onto my bedroom door, feeling safer knowing I could lock it. That night, I woke up to banging on my door. It was James, calling my name.olivia.in, a tone that wasn't friendly. It was 1:30 a.m. My heart raced, but I pretended to be asleep, too scared to open the door. The next morning, my phone was flooded with texts from him. "We need to talk. Be home after work." I asked if it was about the doorknob, and he snapped back. Yes, I apologized, saying I meant to tell him, but his reply was cold. "It comes off today." I explained I just wanted privacy as a woman living with a guy, hoping he'd understand. He softened a bit, but still insisted the lock had to go. I felt trapped, like my space wasn't mine. Worse, how did he know about the lock? Had he tried to get into my room? The thought made my stomach churn, and I started wondering who I was really living with. The situation with James in Denver was spiraling, and I felt like I was living with a stranger who knew too much about me. After the doorknob incident, I swapped the lock back, but the unease didn't go away. I was always looking over my shoulder, double-checking my room, wondering if he'd been in there again. Then, one afternoon, while James was out, there was a knock at the door. It was a woman about my age, her face serious. She asked if I was living with James. When I said yes, she told me to get out fast. She said James had multiple restraining orders from other women, that he was a known stalker, and it wasn't a coincidence he'd chosen a woman as his roommate. She'd seen me moving in and waited until he was gone to warn me. My heart sank. I thanked her, took her number, and she left. I was terrified, alone in that house, knowing I'd already paid for the month. I started packing and searching for new places online. I found a studio apartment across town, a bit pricier, but available immediately. Perfect. Now I just had to tell James and get my money back. I texted him, saying I had to move out the next day due to a family emergency. He didn't reply. When he got home, I fed him the same story, and he agreed to refund me after a bank run tomorrow. I was relieved, but then he knocked on my door and asked if some girl had said something to me. I played dumb, insisting it was just family stuff. He stared at me, unconvinced, before muttering, "Okay," and leaving. I locked my door, but sleep didn't come easily. That night, I woke up screaming. A dark figure was sitting at the end of my bed. James. He turned, put his hand over my mouth, and shushed me. I begged him not to hurt me, my voice shaking. He said, "Why would I hurt you? I know someone said something. Don't believe them." Then he did something that still haunts me. He started stroking my leg, saying, "I don't mean to scare you." I bolted out of bed, ran for the door, and he yelled at me to stop. I grabbed my phone and sprinted outside, hiding in a bush while I called the police. They arrived quickly, and I explained everything. The missing underwear, the lock, the woman's warning, and James in my room. They brought him outside, and he played it cool, denying he'd even been in there. I insisted on getting my stuff and my money while the cops were there. James handed over the cash, acting like some normal guy. But one officer pulled me aside and said James had a history of incidents with women. It was my word against his, so no charges, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. I packed my things, loaded my car, and drove to a hotel for the night. The next day, I moved into the studio apartment. The woman who rented it was kind, helping me settle in fast. I've never felt so relieved. That experience changed me. I'll never live with a stranger again, especially not a man I don't know. I still think about that night, James's hand on my leg, the way he watched me. If you're moving in with someone new, dig into their past. Ask questions. Trust your instincts. One wrong move, and you could end up feeling like I did, trapped, watched, and completely powerless in a place that's supposed to be home.